Picture this. It's noon, the sun's blazing, and I'm watering my tomatoes when boom, a crash echoes from my fence, followed by a shriek. Deborah, the HOA's self-proclaimed queen, in her gaudy floral dress, just fell off a ladder trying to snoop into my yard. Welcome to the Willow Creek drama. She thinks she can control every blade of grass on my property, but she's got no clue who she's messing with. Let's just say I'm not exactly the average neighbor she expected. This story's gonna make you laugh till you cry, so drop a comment below. Where are you watching from? Let me know who's in on this. It was an ordinary Tuesday afternoon in late May when everything changed in our quiet neighborhood of Willow Creek. The sun blazed overhead as I watered my vegetable garden, my sanctuary of organic produce that I'd carefully cultivated over the past 3 years. I had just started on the heirloom tomatoes when I heard an almighty crash and a shriek from the other side of my privacy fence. Setting down my watering can with a sigh, I walked over to investigate, though I already had a pretty good idea what, or rather who, I would find. Sure enough, there was Deborah Walsh, our neighborhood's HOA president, sprawled inelegantly on the ground beside a fallen ladder, her floral dress hiked up to reveal knees scraped raw from the fall. "Lucas Bennett," she screeched when she saw me, attempting to push herself up with one hand while pointing an accusatory finger at me with the other. "I know you're hiding something illegal in that yard of yours. Why else would you need such a tall fence? It's against HOA regulations." Her voice carried through the neighborhood like a tornado siren, deliberately drawing attention from anyone who might be home at 2 in the afternoon on a weekday. I maintained my composure, though inside I was seething. "Deborah, you're trespassing. And I'm not hiding anything illegal. It's a vegetable garden. The fence is the exact height permitted in the HOA bylaws, which I've read thoroughly. Now, do you need medical assistance or can you manage?" I kept my voice level, but I couldn't help the slight curl of my lip as I watched her struggle to her feet, brushing dirt from her gaudy dress. As she stood, I heard her mutter something under her breath that caught my attention. Mom was right. Without control, you lose everything. The comment struck me as odd, but before I could process it, she was already limping away, shooting daggers at me over her shoulder. "This isn't over, Lucas. The HOA will be sending you a formal notice. Your secretive behavior is causing concern among residents." I watched her hobble down the street, already rehearsing whatever version of events would cast her as the victim in this situation. Back inside my home, I sat down at my desk and pulled up the neighborhood security system on my computer. Few people in Willow Creek knew that I had designed the entire network of IoT sensors that monitored the community. It was my profession designing smart home and community systems, but I kept a low profile in the neighborhood, avoiding HOA meetings and social gatherings whenever possible. Privacy was important to me, both professionally and personally. I accessed the camera feed from the street and rewound to capture Deborah's ladder incident. There she was, in full color, deliberately positioning a ladder against my fence and climbing it to peer into my yard. No ambiguity, no question of intent. I saved the footage, knowing it might come in handy. Then, with a few keystrokes, I expanded my search parameters and discovered something interesting. Deborah made a habit of spying on neighbors. In the past week alone, she had peeked into 3 other yards, clipboard in hand, documenting supposed violations. Later that evening, as I was preparing dinner, I heard a gentle knock at my door. It was Evelyn Harper, my 60-year-old neighbor from across the street, holding a plate of cookies. "I saw what happened with Deborah today," she said, her eyes twinkling with barely suppressed amusement as I invited her in. "This woman has been a terror since she took over the HOA 3 years ago. Did you know her husband left her because of her controlling behavior? Apparently, she grew up with an extremely domineering mother who monitored her every move. Now she does the same to all of us." Evelyn took a seat at my kitchen island, helping herself to a glass of the iced tea I offered. "Between you and me, Lucas, someone needs to put that woman in her place. She's driving everyone crazy with her nitpicking and rule enforcement. Just last week, she fined Claire and Wynn for having her hedges 2 inches above regulation height. Claire is a single mom working 2 jobs. She doesn't have time to measure her shrubbery with a ruler." I nodded, surprised to hear about Clara. She lived a few houses down and had always seemed to keep to herself. "I didn't know Deborah was targeting others so aggressively," I admitted, leaning against the counter. "I've been trying to avoid conflict, but she seems determined to make me her next project." Evelyn's eyes narrowed slightly as she studied me. "You know, Lucas, sometimes avoiding conflict just encourages bullies. Deborah preys on those who won't stand up to her. She's insecure at her core, always trying to prove herself worthy of her mother's approval. Even now, I considered this information, turning it over in my mind as Evelyn continued. Anyway, I just wanted you to know you're not alone. Many of us are fed up with her tactics. As Evelyn was leaving, I noticed a small device mounted on the lamppost directly across from my house. It hadn't been there the day before, and its position gave it a clear view of my front door. A fake sensor, placed there by Deborah, no doubt meant to intimidate me. That night, I sat in my home office, fingers flying over my keyboard as I analyzed the neighborhood's security network. The fake sensor across from my house wasn't connected to anything. It was purely for show, but its presence bothered me. It was a statement, a declaration of war from Deborah. I leaned back in my chair, a slow smile spreading across my face. "You want to play games, Deborah?" I murmured to myself. "Fine, but I know every inch of this system." I took a sip of my coffee, already formulating a plan. But I had no idea that Deborah was preparing something much dirtier than I could have anticipated. The formal HOA violation notice arrived in my mailbox the very next morning, printed on obnoxiously bright yellow paper as if the color itself could convey the severity of my supposed infractions. I skimmed the document, which cited excessive privacy measures potentially concealing unauthorized property alterations, and demanded an inspection of my backyard within 48 hours. At the bottom, Deborah's signature sprawled across the page in looping, aggressive cursive. I folded the notice carefully and slipped it into my desk drawer rather than crumpling it as my instincts urged. Documentation would be important if this situation escalated, which, knowing Deborah, it almost certainly would. Later that afternoon, my security system alerted me to movement near my back fence. I switched to the camera feed and watched as a man in a cheap suit and hard hat examined my fence line, occasionally making notes on a clipboard. I recognized him as Jerry Miller, Deborah's friend who ran a struggling landscaping business. This was no official inspection. This was Deborah sending her personal spy to gather ammunition against me. When he attempted to unlatch my gate, I triggered the sprinkler system remotely. The sudden spray of water sent him scrambling backward, clipboard held over his head, expensive shoes sinking into the mud. Through my kitchen window, I could see him retreating down the side of my house, soaked and swearing. That evening, I decided to do some reconnaissance of my own. Using my expertise in IoT systems, I hacked into the fake sensor Deborah had placed across from my house. As I suspected, it contained a small recording device that captured audio from a surprising distance. Deborah had been eavesdropping on conversations happening in front of my house, a clear violation of privacy laws. But as I dug deeper into the network of similar devices throughout the neighborhood, I discovered something more disturbing. Deborah had been recording residents all over Willow Creek, collecting snippets of private conversations to use as leverage in her HOA enforcement. The next morning, as I left for a coffee run, I spotted Deborah sitting in her car, watching my house through binoculars poorly disguised behind a newspaper. Rather than confronting her directly, I returned home and composed an anonymous email. "Stop recording your neighbors without consent. What you're doing is illegal and someone knows." I hit send and waited. 20 minutes later, my doorbell camera showed Deborah rushing to check the fake sensor, panic evident in her jerky movements as she looked around wildly, as if expecting to find the sender watching her. Later that day, I ran into Tyler Reed, the neighborhood's maintenance worker, fixing a broken sprinkler head in the community park. "Hey, Lucas," he called out, "I heard Deborah's on your case now. Welcome to the club, man. That woman has me working double shifts for the same pay, threatening to report me to the management company if I don't comply. Last week, she made me repaint her porch for free, claiming it was community property because it faces the street." As I was walking home, I noticed Clara Wynn in her front yard, measuring her hedges with worried precision. She looked up as I passed. "It's Lucas, right?" "I'm Clara. Deborah gave me a violation notice yesterday. My hedges are apparently 2 inches too tall. I have 72 hours to fix them or face a $100 fine. I'm a single mom working 2 jobs. I don't have time for this nonsense." That evening, I caught a glimpse of Deborah through her home office window. She was sitting at her desk, staring at a framed photograph, her posture rigid. I zoomed in, as much as the resolution would allow, and saw that the photo appeared to be of an older woman, with the same harsh features as Deborah. Her mother, most likely. As I watched, Deborah clenched her fist and seemed to be talking to the photograph. This wasn't just about HOA regulations for Deborah. This was personal, deeply rooted in something from her past. The following morning, my security system alerted me to activity at my front door. I found a stack of flyers warning residents about suspicious activity at my address and urging neighbors to report any unusual behavior. No specific allegations were made, just vague insinuations designed to turn my neighbors against me. I crumpled the paper in my fist, finally losing my cool. In the privacy of my home, I let out a frustrated shout, but after a few deep breaths, clarity returned. Deborah was escalating because she felt threatened. I straightened my shoulders and turned back to my computer. "You want a war, Deborah? I'm just getting warmed up." But what I didn't know was that I would soon receive a letter that would throw the entire neighborhood into chaos. The morning after discovering Deborah's flyers, I woke to my phone buzzing incessantly with text messages and missed calls. Neighbors I barely knew were reaching out, some with concern, others with suspicion. Overnight, Deborah had distributed a new batch of flyers throughout Willow Creek, this time with specific allegations. Alert: unsuspected in animal breeding. Operation suspected at 42 Maple Drive, my address. The flyer claimed that strange noises and unusual odors had been reported, suggesting I was running some kind of illegal pet mill in my backyard. The absurdity would have been laughable if it weren't so damaging. I didn't even own a pet, let alone an entire breeding operation. As I stepped outside, several neighbors across the street watched me, their expressions ranging from curious to concerned. When I waved, they quickly looked away. The isolation was immediate and palpable. Only Evelyn Harper offered a sympathetic smile from her porch, letting me know she wasn't buying into Deborah's propaganda. Back inside, I paced my living room, feeling doubt wash over me. I had moved to Willow Creek seeking peace and privacy, not a neighborhood war. For a brief moment, I considered selling my house and starting fresh. But running away would only embolden Deborah to target someone else, perhaps Clara or another neighbor who couldn't defend themselves as effectively. With renewed determination, I set about documenting everything: the flyers, the fake censor, the illegal audio recordings, the violation notices based on fabricated concerns. While reviewing my security footage, I discovered Deborah had been recording conversations throughout the neighborhood for months. In one particularly disturbing clip, she clearly threatened an elderly resident with daily fines unless they removed a small American flag from their porch because it wasn't the regulation size specified in HOA guidelines. I added this to my growing collection of evidence, but felt it still wasn't enough for a decisive blow against Deborah. That afternoon, a soft knock at my door revealed Clara Nguyen, looking uncomfortable but determined. Deborah fined me $300 for my hedges, 3 times the original amount, claiming I was deliberately defiant because I trimmed them myself instead of hiring her recommended landscaper. When I protested, she threatened to place a lien on my house. Clara's hands trembled as she showed me the new violation notice. "I can't afford this. My son's tuition is due next week and I'm already working double shifts." I examined the document, noting that it lacked the required signatures from other HOA board members. "This isn't even legally enforceable," I told her. "She's counting on you not knowing the bylaws well enough to challenge her." Clara's shoulders relaxed slightly, but concern still lined her face. "Evelyn told me you might be gathering information about Deborah's activities." I studied her before making a decision. "Would you like to see what she's really been up to?" Over the next hour, I showed Clara selected evidence: the illegal recording devices, the video of Deborah threatening the elderly resident, the falsified violation notices. With each revelation, Clara's expression shifted from skepticism to shock and finally to anger. "I had no idea it was this bad. She told everyone you were running an illegal business, maybe even something dangerous. I was worried about my son being near your house. I'm so sorry I believed any of it." That evening, I found a formal notice in my mail informing me that a special HOA meeting had been called to discuss my ongoing violations and community safety concerns. The meeting was scheduled for just 2 days away, giving me minimal time to prepare a defense. The document listed Deborah as the primary complainant, but also included signatures from 3 other board members, all close friends who regularly benefited from her selective enforcement of HOA rules. Back at home, my security system alerted me to movement in my side yard. The camera feed showed Tyler Reed moving stealthily along my fence line. I was about to trigger the perimeter alarm when Tyler looked directly into the camera and held up a USB drive, pointing to it urgently. I disabled the alarm and met him at the side gate. "Sorry for the cloak and dagger routine," Tyler whispered, "but Deborah's watching your house, and I can't be seen helping you." He pressed the small drive into my hand. "It's security footage from the community center. Deborah doesn't know I have access to the backup server. There's stuff on here you'll want to see, especially about what she's been telling the other board members about you." After Tyler left, I watched with growing disbelief as Deborah systematically lied to the HOA board about me. According to her, multiple residents had filed complaints about strange noises and odors. Untrue. Local animal control had been called twice, completely fabricated, and I had verbally threatened her when confronted. Absolutely false. The footage also showed Deborah accessing the HOA's financial records late at night, though the camera angle didn't reveal exactly what she was doing with them. As darkness fell, I found myself staring at the quiet street outside. The neighborhood I had chosen for its peace had become a battleground, and I was being forced to fight a war I never wanted. "I need something stronger," I murmured to myself. Little did I know that Deborah was about to hand me exactly what I needed, and that her desperation would lead her to make a fatal mistake in her campaign against me. The morning of the HOA meeting arrived with an unusual stillness in the air, as if the entire neighborhood was holding its breath. I had spent most of the night preparing my defense, organizing my evidence into a clear presentation. As I rehearsed one final time, a notification from my security system drew my attention. The backyard sensors had detected movement along the fence line. Switching to the camera feed, I watched in disbelief as Deborah positioned a ladder against my fence. She'd brought tools, garden shears, and what appeared to be a small camera. The audacity was stunning. Hours before, she planned to publicly accuse me of violations. She was actively trespassing, attempting to either plant evidence or gather it illegally. I watched the feed, recording everything as Deborah climbed the ladder with surprising agility. She reached the top and peered over my fence, the camera aimed at my vegetable garden. Suddenly the ladder wobbled. She had placed it on uneven ground and began to tilt. Deborah let out a shrill cry as she and the ladder toppled backward. Unlike the previous fall, this one looked painful. She landed awkwardly, the ladder clattering on top of her, and I could see her face contort in agony as she clutched her leg. For a moment, I felt concern. Despite everything, I didn't want anyone injured on my property. Before I could step outside to help, Deborah had somehow pulled herself up and was hobbling away, her face a mask of pain and fury. 3 hours later, as I was preparing to leave for the HOA meeting, a police cruiser pulled into my driveway. 2 officers approached my door. "Mr. Bennett, we're responding to an assault complaint filed by Deborah Walsh. She claims you booby-trapped your property, causing her to fall and break her leg. She's currently at Willow Creek Memorial Hospital." I felt a surge of disbelief followed quickly by anger that Deborah would go this far. "Officers, I have video footage of what actually happened," I said calmly. "Ms. Walsh was trespassing and fell due to her own negligence." The officers watched in silence as the security footage showed Deborah positioning the ladder, climbing it with her camera, and falling when the ladder slipped. "She was attempting to record my backyard without permission," I explained, which is just the latest in a pattern of harassment. I showed them selected evidence, the fake sensors, the defamatory flyers, the falsified violation notices. By the time I finished, the officer's demeanor had shifted noticeably. "We'll need a copy of this footage for our report," the older officer said, "and I'd suggest you consider filing your own complaint about the harassment and trespassing." After the police left, I slumped in my chair, overwhelmed by the escalation. Deborah had actually tried to have me charged with assault. In the privacy of my home, I lost my composure for the first time. "What is wrong with her?" I shouted at the empty room, slamming my hand on the desk. For several minutes, I paced my office, venting my frustration. But gradually, clarity returned. Deborah had just made a critical mistake. By filing a false police report, she had escalated this beyond petty neighborhood politics. This was now a legal matter, and the evidence was on my side. I called the hospital to check on Deborah, partly out of concern, but also to establish that I had acted responsibly. The nurse confirmed that Miss Walsh was being treated for a fractured fibula. My phone buzzed with a text from Tyler. "Meeting postponed due to Dee's accident. Heard she's telling everyone you rigged the ladder. Board talking about emergency measures against you. Watch your back." The following day, a certified letter arrived from an attorney representing Deborah, informing me that she was suing me for personal injury, emotional distress, and property damage. The letter demanded $50,000 in damages plus medical expenses. I scanned it and emailed it to my own attorney along with a summary of the situation. His response came within the hour. "Don't worry about this. Clear case of trespassing with video evidence. I'll handle it." That evening, as I reviewed the neighborhood security footage, I noticed something odd. Several clips from around the time of Deborah's fall appeared to have been deleted from the system. Someone with administrative access had been tampering with evidence. Since I'd built the system, I had implemented multiple backups. I accessed the secondary server and found the missing footage, which showed Deborah speaking to someone in a car before heading to my house with the ladder. I zoomed in on the vehicle, a black sedan with tinted windows, but couldn't identify the driver. What was clear was that Deborah's actions had been premeditated and possibly coordinated with someone else. The next morning, I woke to find my front yard filled with neighbors. A crowd had gathered, all talking in hushed voices while casting glances at my house. At the center of the group, seated in a wheelchair with her leg in a cast, was Deborah, holding court like a queen. She had turned her injury into a public spectacle, a rally to gather support. I walked through the window as she gesticulated wildly, occasionally dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, putting on a performance of the traumatized victim. Only Evelyn and Clara stood apart, their expressions making it clear they weren't buying Deborah's act. I took a deep breath and opened my front door to face the Inquisition. But as I stepped onto my porch, I had no idea that Deborah had already prepared her next move. One that would drag us both into a courtroom confrontation that would change Willow Creek forever. 2 weeks after the latter incident, I found myself sitting in the county courthouse, waiting for the preliminary hearing in Walsh v. Bennett to begin. My attorney, Martina Rodriguez, sat beside me reviewing our evidence. Across the aisle, Deborah sat with her leg still in a cast, now adorned with signatures from sympathetic neighbors. She had added a neck brace, which hadn't been present during her front yard performance, and winced dramatically whenever anyone looked her way. Her attorney, a slick-hamed man in an expensive but ill-fitting suit, leaned close to whisper in her ear. Deborah had not only pressed forward with her lawsuit, but had also launched a social media campaign against me, creating a neighborhood watch page where she posted updates about the dangerous resident of 42 Maple Drive. Though she never named me directly, she included enough details that everyone in Willow Creek knew exactly who she meant. Some neighbors had taken her warnings to heart, crossing the street to avoid walking past my house. Others, however, were beginning to question Deborah's version of events. As the hearing began, Deborah's attorney presented their case with flourish, describing me as a reclusive, hostile resident who had created unsafe conditions to deter the HOA president from performing her official duties. He claimed Deborah had been conducting a routine exterior inspection from public property when she fell due to a deliberately destabilized section of ground near my fence. When he finished, Deborah dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, her shoulders shaking in a performance that seemed rehearsed rather than genuine. When it was our turn, Martina calmly walked the judge through the timeline of harassment, presenting the security footage of both latter incidents. The courtroom fell silent as the video clearly showed Deborah trespassing and falling when her improperly positioned ladder slipped. "Your Honor," Martina concluded, "this case represents an attempt to weaponize the legal system as part of an ongoing harassment campaign. Ms. Walsh was trespassing, and Mr. Bennett has video evidence that contradicts every claim in her lawsuit." Before Deborah could respond to the judge's questions, her attorney jumped in. "Your Honor, we have reason to believe the video has been altered. Mr. Bennett is an IT professional with the skills to manipulate digital evidence." He produced a flash drive. "We have our own footage from a witness that shows Ms. Walsh was on the public sidewalk when the incident occurred." My heart raced as the judge instructed the bailiff to play this new evidence. The screen displayed a video showing Deborah on the sidewalk before suddenly falling. The timestamp matched the date of the incident, but everything else was clearly fabricated. Martina requested a forensic examination of the footage. Even a preliminary viewing shows several inconsistencies, including shadow angles that don't match the timestamp and visible editing markers in the metadata. The judge ordered a forensic analysis of all video evidence and fixed Deborah with a stern look. "Mrs. Walsh, I suggest you make absolutely certain your testimony accurately reflects events as they occurred. Presenting falsified evidence would have serious consequences." As we left the courthouse, Deborah hobbled past on her crutches, shooting me a venomous glare. "This isn't over, Lucas," she hissed. "You think you're so clever with your cameras and your fancy lawyer, but I've lived in Willow Creek for 15 years. These people trust me, not some antisocial tech geek who hides behind his fence." I maintained my composure, simply raising an eyebrow as I responded, "You're right about one thing, Deborah. This isn't over. Not by a long shot." That evening, Tyler, Evelyn, and Clara gathered in my living room for our informal strategy meeting. "Deborah's getting desperate," Tyler said. "She cornered me at work, offering to forgive all my violation fines if I'd testify that I'd seen you tampering with the ground near your fence." Clara pulled a folder from her bag. "I work at First National Bank, where Deborah has the HOA accounts. She came in yesterday to make a large withdrawal from the community fund, $5,000 in cash. When I asked about the required second signature, she claimed it was an emergency legal expense approved by the board." This new information sent my mind racing. Why would Deborah need $5,000 in cash? The timing, right after the judge ordered a forensic analysis of her doctored video, seemed highly suspicious. She might be trying to bribe someone, I speculated. Perhaps the tech expert who created that fake video. Later that night, I noticed Deborah meeting with her attorney in the community park, far from any houses. Though I couldn't hear their conversation, their body language told a story. Deborah gesticulating wildly, the attorney shaking his head repeatedly. At one point, Deborah shoved what appeared to be an envelope into the attorney's hands, which he reluctantly accepted after glancing around nervously. The next morning, a certified letter arrived from the court. The forensic analysis had been expedited, and the results were definitive. Deborah's video had been created through digital manipulation. The judge had dismissed her lawsuit with prejudice and referred the matter to the district attorney's office for potential charges. I read the letter twice, relief washing over me, but as I looked up, my security dashboard showed Deborah's car rapidly backing out of her driveway, a suitcase visible in her back seat. "Running away, Deborah?" I murmured. I reached for my phone, but paused when a notification popped up on my screen. My financial monitoring alert showed another large withdrawal had just been processed from the HOA accounts, $20,000. My fingers hovered over the phone as I realized we had just stumbled upon Deborah's biggest secret. The bank alert couldn't have come at a more critical moment. $20,000 had been withdrawn from the HOA reserve fund merely hours after Deborah's lawsuit was dismissed and minutes before she was seen fleeing with a suitcase. I immediately called Clara, who confirmed the transaction had indeed been processed without the required dual signatures. "I wasn't at the counter when it happened," she explained. "Deborah must have known I would question the withdrawal." I quickly called Martina, who instructed me to notify the police immediately. "This goes beyond HOA drama now, Lucas. This is embezzlement, and her attempt to flee suggests consciousness of guilt." Within 30 minutes, Detective Rivera had issued a BOLO for Deborah's vehicle. I accessed traffic cameras near the highway entrances, searching for her blue sedan. After nearly an hour, I spotted her car at a gas station just off the interstate, 20 miles outside of Willow Creek. I immediately forwarded the location to Detective Rivera, who assured me officers were en route. As I waited for news, I couldn't help but wonder how things had escalated to this point. What had started as a neighborhood dispute over a fence had somehow uncovered financial crimes that could send Deborah to prison. Later that evening, Detective Rivera arrived at my door. "We got her," he said simply. "Found her at a motel near the state line, checking in under a false name. She had the cash in her suitcase, along with a new cell phone and documents for what appears to be a fake identity." Over the next hour, I walked him through the entire saga. From Deborah's first ladder incident to the falsified court evidence. By the time I finished, Detective Rivera was shaking his head in disbelief. In 20 years on the force, I've seen some neighborhood disputes get ugly, but this is something else entirely. Before leaving, he requested copies of all my evidence. "The DA is looking at multiple charges: criminal trespassing, filing a false police report, perjury, presenting falsified evidence, and now embezzlement. She's looking at serious prison time." He paused at the door. "One thing I don't understand. Why you? What made her target you so specifically?" I had pondered this question myself. "I think it was because I represented something she couldn't control," I replied. "I valued my privacy, avoided her meetings, and built a fence, all perfectly within HOA regulations, but all symbols of independence from her authority. For someone whose entire identity is built around control, that was intolerable." The next morning, I was awakened by the sound of car doors slamming outside. Peering through the blinds, I saw 3 police cruisers and an unmarked car parked along the street. Officers were approaching Deborah's house with a search warrant. Curious residents gathered on their lawns, watching as officers carried boxes of documents and electronic devices from the house. I noticed Evelyn among the onlookers and decided to join her. "They've been at it for an hour," she informed me. Apparently, they found evidence of more financial improprieties in the HOA accounts. Clara just texted me. Deborah has been skimming from the community fund for years. Tyler joined us, offering paper cups of coffee. You won't believe what they found in her office at the community center, he said in a low voice. A whole filing cabinet full of personal information on residents. Bank statements, credit reports, even medical records in some cases. She's been using HOA authority to collect sensitive data on everyone in Willow Creek. I felt a chill run down my spine. Deborah's invasion of privacy went far beyond peering over fences. She had been systematically violating the most personal boundaries of her neighbors, building a repository of secrets she could potentially use for blackmail or manipulation. By early afternoon, news vans had arrived, drawn by the story of an HOA president's spectacular fall from power. I politely declined comment when approached by reporters. As I walked away, I noticed Deborah's attorney hurrying toward his car, pursued by another reporter. His face was ashen, his usual confidence completely evaporated. Later, I would learn that investigators had found text messages suggesting he was aware of Deborah's evidence tampering in our lawsuit. That evening, as twilight settled over Willow Creek, I sat on my back porch, enjoying the peace of my garden for the first time in weeks. My phone buzzed with a text from Clara. Emergency HOA meeting called for tomorrow, interim leadership being appointed. Several members suggested you should join the board. I smiled at the irony. Me, the neighborhood recluse who had avoided HOA involvement, now being invited to help lead it. Another text arrived from Detective Rivera. While in custody, Walsh requested paper and pen to write what she claimed was an apology letter. Officers discovered she was actually writing threatening notes to you and several others. She's been placed on suicide watch and psychiatric hold. The news disturbed me more than I expected. Despite everything Deborah had done, I took no pleasure in her mental health deteriorating. I thought back to the glimpses I'd caught of her speaking to her mother's photograph, the desperation in her posture, the obsessive need for control that had ultimately destroyed her life. There was something deeply tragic about a person so consumed by fear of powerlessness that they would sacrifice everything rather than relinquish their small fiefdom of authority. My philosophical musings were interrupted by an alert from my security system. A vehicle was approaching my driveway. The camera feed showed an official county car parking outside. A woman in a suit emerged, carrying a large envelope. She identified herself as a representative from the district attorney's office. Mr. Bennett, we're preparing the case against Deborah Walsh and have some additional questions. Would you be willing to come in tomorrow morning to make a formal statement? As she turned to leave, she paused. The DA wanted me to personally thank you. Your meticulous record-keeping has made this case much stronger than it might have been. Back inside, I spread the DA's documents on my kitchen table. The final question caught my eye. In your opinion, did Deborah Walsh's behavior show premeditation and awareness of wrongdoing, or do you believe she was delusional about her authority? It was a complex question that forced me to consider Deborah as more than simply an antagonist. My computer chimed with an incoming email from Martina, with a subject line that made my heart race. Urge new evidence found. I opened it immediately, my eyes widening as I read the contents. Even after everything that had happened, Deborah had one final surprise in store. The email from Martina contained bombshell information that even I hadn't uncovered. The police search of Deborah's home had revealed a hidden safe containing 15 years' worth of HOA financial records, meticulously annotated in her handwriting. These documents showed that her embezzlement wasn't a recent act of desperation, but a systematic scheme that had begun almost immediately after she became HOA president. Over the years, she had stolen nearly $150,000 from community funds through fake maintenance projects, inflated contractor invoices, and administrative fees that went directly into her personal accounts. The records also included a list of residents who had paid her Exodus approval fees, essentially bribes to overlook HOA violations. Most disturbing of all, Deborah had kept detailed dossiers on every homeowner in Willow Creek, noting potential leverage points, ranging from financial difficulties to marital problems. My name appeared on a separate list labeled Threats to Authority, alongside Clara and several other residents who had challenged her decisions. Next to my name was a series of failed intervention strategies, culminating in the notation, Legal Action Unsuccessful. Proceed to blackmail using bank records. The cold, calculating nature of these documents painted a picture of someone far more methodical in her manipulation than I had realized. The following morning, I gave my statement to the district attorney's office. When I finished, the assistant DA shook my hand with genuine appreciation. Thanks to your evidence and these financial records, we're looking at multiple felony accounts. Ms. Walsh will be facing a significant prison sentence. As I left the office, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Relief that justice was being served, vindication that my stand against Deborah had been justified, but also a lingering sadness for a woman whose life had become so distorted by her need for control. 2 days later, an emergency community meeting was held at the Willow Creek Community Center. Nearly every resident attended, the room buzzing with shock and confusion as the full extent of Deborah's crimes was publicly disclosed. The interim HOA board presented a preliminary assessment of the financial damage and the steps being taken to recover the stolen funds. When I entered the room, conversations paused momentarily as neighbors turned to look at me, not with suspicion, but with newfound respect. Several people approached to apologize for believing Deborah's lies, while others thanked me for standing my ground. "The board has a proposition for you," Clara whispered as I sat down beside her. "We need someone with technological expertise to help secure the HOA's digital systems. Would you consider taking on an advisory role?" I chuckled softly at the irony of being asked to officially participate in the very organization I had so studiously avoided. Despite my preference for privacy, I recognized that my neighbors needed help rebuilding what Deborah had corrupted. The meeting proceeded with discussions of immediate actions, an independent audit of HOA finances, new checks and balances for financial transactions, and more transparent processes for addressing violations. When the floor opened for questions, an elderly resident admitted he had paid Deborah $800 to expedite approval for his gazebo. The interim president, a retired judge named Howard Simmons, assured him and others that they were considered victims, not a. As the meeting concluded, Howard announced that Deborah had agreed to a plea deal. As part of that agreement, she will publicly apologize to the community, specifically to those she targeted most aggressively, including Lucas Bennett, Clara Nguyen, and Tyler Reed. A murmur of satisfaction rippled through the crowd. The apology will take place on the community green next Saturday before she begins serving her sentence of 8 to 12 years. The day of Deborah's public apology dawned bright and clear. By 9:30, nearly every resident of Willow Creek had gathered on the community green. At precisely 10 o'clock, a police cruiser arrived, and Deborah emerged, flanked by officers. Her transformation was startling. Gone was the imperious HOA queen. In her place was a diminished figure in a wrinkled floral dress, her hair uncombed, her makeup smeared, as if she'd been crying. Her leg was still in a cast, but she refused assistance as she hobbled to the podium. For several long moments, Deborah stared at the crowd, her expression a mixture of anger, shame, and defeat. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "As part of my plea agreement, I am required to apologize to the community of Willow Creek for my actions as HOA president." The mechanical delivery made it clear this was not genuine remorse, but a required performance. When she reached the part about apologizing to me, her voice hardened. "I apologize to Lucas Bennett for my attempts to discredit him." The pause and careful word choice spoke volumes about her continued reluctance to fully admit wrongdoing. As Deborah finished and was led back to the police cruiser, Clara stepped forward. "On behalf of the new HOA board, I want to assure everyone that Willow Creek is entering a new chapter. We will operate with transparency, fairness, and respect for every resident's rights and privacy." Her words were met with enthusiastic applause. As the police car drove away, I noticed neighbors turning toward each other, striking up conversations. What had been a collection of isolated households was beginning to feel like a genuine community. In the weeks that followed, Willow Creek underwent a remarkable transformation. My first official act as technology advisor was to rename the neighborhood's Wi-Fi network to HOA Free Zone, a small joke that became a symbol of the new approach to community governance. I also installed a small sign at the edge of my yard reading "Private Area, No Ladders Allowed," which became a local landmark, with neighbors stopping to take pictures and share them online. 6 months later, my doorbell rang one Saturday afternoon. I opened it to find Evelyn. "The neighborhood barbecue starts in an hour," she reminded me. "And no, you can't hide in your house this time. People are expecting the hero of Willow Creek to make an appearance." As she turned to leave, she handed me an envelope bearing an unfamiliar logo. Inside was a letter from a neighboring development requesting a consultation about designing a security system for their community. As I walked to the barbecue later that afternoon, I reflected on how life takes us in unexpected directions. I had moved to Willow Creek seeking privacy, yet here I was, more connected to my neighbors than I had ever planned to be. I arrived at the green to find neighbors grilling, children playing, and a genuine sense of community permeating the air. Clara waved me over to where she stood with Tyler and Evelyn. "To Willow Creek," she said, raising her glass in a toast, "and to ladders in all the wrong places." So where are you watching this neighborhood drama from? Drop a comment below. And if you've ever dealt with an HOA nightmare of your own, I'd love to hear your story. Sometimes the best revenge against petty tyrants isn't complex schemes, it's simply standing your ground and letting them dig their own graves. After all, as Deborah learned the hard way, when you climb a ladder to spy on your neighbors, you'd better make sure it's on solid ground.
From the whispers to the wreckage, HOA Stories brings it all. Click that next video, if you can handle it.